I'm finally doing this. Hey guys, what is up? It's me, EDJ Reacts, and I'm finally watching The Rise of China by Epic History. I've heard nothing but good things about this, and I kind of waited until he was done. It seems like he's done, so I feel safe in now watching this, because I like to at least wait till series are done before I, like, straight up watch them. And like again, I've heard a lot of good things about this, and I've always kind of been very interested in Chinese history, but probably not for the right reasons in the past. Mainly because of how unhinged it could be between like rebellions being started because a dude claimed he's the brother of Jesus, or like guys drinking the menstrual blood of like women to obtain immortality. Like there's a lot of wild things. I think Chinese history is probably the most unhinged history I've ever had the pleasure and sometimes displeasure of learning about. And that in the many battles where the casualties were like nearing a billion. It's always kind of like a meme that Chinese battles are like super high in body count, and that's due to its, you know, how populous China is. Very known for its large population and manpower. And I'm really happy that that this series exists, because we did watch the Russian video about the history of Russia by Epic History. It doesn't seem like he's gonna go the same route though. He tried to basically condense the majority of Russian history in his few part Russian thing, but this series seems like it's mainly gonna cover the fall of the last dynasty of Imperial China and to the rise of modern China. So it seems like the time frame is going to be a lot more condensed, because I was going to be like, it'd be wild if he tried to fit in all of China just history into just 6 parts, because China is such a old civilization. I remember when I was a child, really long time ago, like in the single digits, maybe like 6 or something. One of my teachers was talking about some of the oldest civilizations in the world. They brought up 5. I forgot 3 of them, but the two I remember them mentioning are China and Egypt as 2 of the oldest civilizations that are still around to this day. So there's so much that has happened. These places are so rich in history, but I feel like of all the historical YouTubers we've seen between Kings and Generals, Epic History, they haven't gone too deep into these areas, especially Egypt. I feel like Egypt is so, among a lot of historical YouTubers, very underutilized because of just how much dynasties you could talk about and how Egypt has been around forever. I feel like some of these places have been kind of not fully utilized, because if I was like a historical YouTuber, I'd probably try to do an Egypt series right away. There you can have like a decade's worth of content just from like one of these places alone. So either way, there's still a lot to I'm kind of glad they're kind of getting into this, like China and stuff, because again, there's just so much to cover and so much history, so much great literature. I remember I started reading the Journey to the West, and I also got into the Three Kingdoms period thanks to a Chinese class I took in one of my semesters back when I used to, before I graduated from college. So overall, there's still just so much, and I'm really excited to see Epic History explain. So, we probably should get to it now, but first, if you want to watch the original video by Kings in General, Epic History, I'm so sorry. If you want to watch the original video by Epic History, the link is down in the description down below. And if you enjoy my content and you want to help me out in any way, shape, or form, feel free to please like, comment, subscribe, maybe consider becoming like a Patreon member. That would really help me out a lot. But with that said, and now without any further ado, we ought to get into it. Let us watch the first part of Epic History's The Rise of China, titled How Did China's 2,000 year empire collapse? All of creation will celebrate. All of mankind will be filled with happiness as long as the Qing ruled.
China, a cradle of world civilization. The land that invented printing, paper, and gunpowder. And under successive dynasties, the center of a vast empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Himalayas, and from the eastern steppe to the tropical South China Sea. The Chinese call it Zhonggua, the central state or middle kingdom. And for more than 2,000 years, its emperors claimed a divine mandate to rule over Tianxia. All
Yeah, the divine mandate of heaven, which sometimes it is funny because it kind of does like it is really similar to the divine right of kings, that you often hear like around Europe and whatnot, and you know there are times where that mandate could be revoked. Actually, there's a lot of times where that happened, where it's like, well, they're kind of corrupt, which is a very convenient way to just be like, well, we can get rid of them now. It is interesting, you know, that okay, after a while, um yeah, that kind of goes to show you, like, if you're really bad at, like, governing, eventually people are gonna turn on you, it doesn't matter. Even if you have, like, are seen as sort of divine, there comes a point where people are like, okay, we're done. It's happened a lot in history, so I always kind of, um, especially with the joke with China, as, especially in that History of the World, I guess, video by Bill Ward, is that China was infamous for being a united empire, breaking, reforming, breaking again. You know, the joke is China broke again. And, you know, due to just how much happened. And I think that just comes with the territory of just being, you know, having so much history, right? But, yeah, overall, just a really interesting, um, thing there.
under heaven. Since 1644, this great empire has been ruled by the Qing dynasty. They are ethnic Manchu from the north, though most of their subjects are Han Chinese. By the 19th century, the empire spans 14.5 million square
My goodness, look at that chunker of an empire. My goodness.
kilometers and receives tribute from many smaller neighbors. Around 450 million people live within these borders, 1/3 of the world's population. It is also estimated that China accounts for 1/3 of the world's wealth. The imperial capital, Peking, and major hubs such as Nanking and Canton are among the greatest cities in the world. It is a multi-ethnic empire whose self-proclaimed aim is not economic or political expansion, but the maintenance of harmony. A worldview that derives from Confucius, a sage of the
Yeah, you know, I mentioned earlier about when I was back in my university days, how I took a class. I was an English major. I got my bachelor's in English, specifically literary studies, and one of my classes that I took was a Chinese class about like Chinese literature and whatnot, and that's actually where like some of my fascination began. I think like over a year or two ago, like back in 2024. And you know, like I said, that's kind of where I got into like the Three Kingdoms period, and then indirectly Dynasty Warriors, which is game series kind of, you know, set in that. It's Dynasty Warriors that it's called, right? Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to be thorough. So, Overall, yeah. And I remember one of the earlier, I guess, projects we had to do it as we had to get into groups and we had to talk about like some type of media and how we could find like Chinese, ideas like Confucianism, Taoism, and kind of like that, Buddhism, and Buddhi Buddhism. Yeah, I'm sorry with the pronunciation. I'm actually super nervous right now. You guys can't probably tell, but I'm super nervous because I'm afraid to pronounce anything regarding China. Like with the Qing, I was like, the Qing, like because I get nervous because I don't want to butcher it, but I know I will. The point is, um. And we had to look at media and see how we could find like these ideals in it. And I remember our group decided Kung Fu Panda and how we could find like some of these ideas within the film of Kung Fu Panda. Unfortunately, another group got to it before us, which is embarrassing. We were all ready, and then the day before our presentation, the class before that, they did a presentation on Kung Fu Panda. We had to scramble, and then we basically just talked about calligraphy, Chinese calligraphy, and some of its healing arts and videos were pertaining to that. But that's kind of where I kind of got familiar with some of these concepts and tried finding them in stuff. So yeah.
The 6th century BC, his teachings have governed society in both public and private realms for 2,000 years. Fundamental values, such as reverence for parents and ancestors, loyalty and benevolence, seek to create an orderly and harmonious society. It is also one that is rigidly conservative. Young men from well-to-do families spend years studying the Confucian classics in preparation for the Imperial civil service exam. This is the only route to the higher levels of the Qing administration. But governed by scholarly bureaucrats and an emperor who is both revered and feared, China is failing to keep up with a rapidly changing world. For the time being, foreign merchants are restricted to the southern port of Canton. Such splendid isolation will prove impossible to sustain.
Yeah, that's really interesting with the whole isolation thing, because you think of like Japan, right? And I think it was the Edo period or around there that they had like they were pretty self-sustaining and whatnot, and the term is isolated, and then like you had foreign powers just show up and immediately bring an end to that, like with Japan America, which basically just threatened Japan and did that. And then I think of like with China, like definitely it seems like in the East there was these periods where yeah, almost like they were kind of just minding their own business, but then the world dragged them into more. So I wonder if he's going to touch on the Opium Wars, because that's kind of like one of the oldest things I remember about learning from China, which was well, if he talks about it, I'll talk about it more. But yeah, I do find that very interesting. We have only one thing to learn from the barbarians, and that is strong ships and effective guns. Not wrong there.
(1839) marks the beginning of China's century of humiliation. For years, British merchants had been smuggling opium from India into China.
The Opium Wars, one of the oldest things I remember learning about China. Like I said, when I was a little kid, I remember hearing about this. Like, I think, I remember back when I was like a kid, obviously we had history classes, and we would have these textbooks, and then I would kind of be reading through them on my own. They would have little excerpts, and I kind of read through them because in class there's only so much you can cover with history, obviously with time and whatnot. So I would kind of go off and read on my own to see that. And I remember reading about this and just thinking, holy crap, that is beyond messed up. what the English, the British did. Like I was always like, holy crap, that's like one of the most evil things I ever read. Getting them addicted to opium, and then just like, it was evil, man. I mean, no empire is purely innocent. You can definitely find any empire or great nation and definitely point out evil things or bad things they've done for sure. But like, this is one of the ones that it's been burned into my memory about just, it just made me feel like, it gave me one of those like disturbed, disgusted feelings when I learned about this. It's like, holy crap, guys, like the British had no chill. It really was beyond messed up.
A vastly lucrative trade. The consequences for China are an addiction epidemic.
Oh my gosh.
But when Qing officials seize and destroy large quantities of the drug in Canton, the British react with force. Using superior naval technology, the British quickly overpower the antiquated Chinese fleet. The Chinese are forced to sign the Treaty of Nanking, the first of what will later be called the Unequal Treaties. The treaty grants special rights to the British, opening 5 ports to British merchants and ceding the territory of Hong Kong. A second Opium War soon extends similar advantages to France and the USA. The Russian Empire further exploits Chinese weakness to seize territory in the northeast. While a horrifying civil war, the Taiping Rebellion, devastates South and Central China.
Yeah, just completely. It is just interesting to see how Western powers like really did bully some of these Eastern powers into basically who were just kind of minding their own, kind of more or less isolated in some ways, and then just basically, all right, now we're gonna drag you into this. It's like, my goodness. But yeah, the Taiping Rebellion is one of those events. We saw like a Jack Rackham video about it. Where, about the Chinese brother of Jesus. My goodness. Sometimes I can't tell if this is one of the silliest ways like a war has started. Like, it's between this or between a guy getting thrown out of a window at prom. So sometimes like war is awful, but sometimes what causes them is like, I'm just like, wait, what? Like, it's hard not to kind of laugh and just be like, what's going on? My goodness.
China for 14 years. The death toll is estimated at 40 million, making it one.
Yeah, I heard that like it outdid World War One. I think I've heard the Taiping Rebellion was more deadly. In fact, I heard it's like one of the most deadly things in human history. Again, I'm trying to remember if it said it rivaled or exceeded World War One. But still, it's up there, right there, which is insane. By the way, this was a self-contained, World War One was a world war. This was just a rebellion in China, and look at how insane. You can see why the memes are always talking about like how a typical Chinese skirmish is like 1 billion losses. Like, it's insane. You know what I mean? Oh my gosh.
One of the bloodiest conflicts in history. While China suffers, her enemies grow stronger. In 1895, a newly modernized Japan, long seen as inferior to China, easily defeats the Qing Navy and wins territorial concessions of its own. Westerners mock China as the sick man of Asia. A
Dang.
giant fallen prey to the imperialism of foreign powers, better adapted to life in the modern world.
Yeah, that kind of goes to show you that the need to keep modernizing, like, because the world will always keep going, and there comes a point where you just can't be too left behind, or else this is... Japan terrified me. From the time... I mean, a lot of Japanese history is pretty intense, but there's that period where they modernize after, America bullied them into, kind of opening up more. That period to World War II was the most terrifying to me. Learning about Japan and what they did, especially during World War II to China. It is some of the most disturbing things ever. Like, I was reading the Wikipedia about it. I was like, holy crap, like... Japan was terrifying, which is, again, like, nowadays, like, Japan, definitely seen in a much more positive light, and they contribute many great things, like anime. I grew up with Japanese anime. I was a big shonen guy, like Naruto, Dragon Ball. Point is, like, Japan's kind of seen in a really great light, especially here in America, but there was that period where they were just... They were terrifying. That period where they modernized to World War II. Japan was one of the most terrifying nations I had the displeasure of learning about. They locked in and they just chose violence the whole time. Yeah, this is really goes to show you the need for great change and just the importance of keeping up with the world, because, if you're perceived as weak, you get taken advantage of.
But by the turn of the 20th century, there is a growing sense of outrage among the Chinese people, and a determination to fight back.
It's an Olympic day home, the less you...
Reform to be strengthened. The guard the old and die.
In 1899, a movement emerges in northern China, calling itself the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists. Its members become better known as the Boxers.
The boxing rebellion? I've heard of this too. Harmonious Fist. I'm sorry, that's an interesting name.
They are outraged by the weakness of the Qing dynasty, the spread of Christianity, and China's repeated humiliations. Their goal? To expel all foreigners from China and end the shameful concessions made to them. The Boxers begin by attacking Western-funded railways, Christian missionaries, and Chinese converts. In June 1900, thousands of Boxers enter Peking and lay siege to the area in the city where foreigners live. They adopt the slogan, "Uphold the Qing, destroy foreigners." For the ruling Empress Dowager Cixi, the Boxers are a problem, but also an opportunity. Cixi decides to throw the weight of the Qing state behind the Boxers and declares war on the foreign powers. It is a terrible miscalculation.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, because, between this century of humiliation, unless they've been, like, adopting guns and, actually learning, this would be an incredibly bad move if they haven't really modernized to be that effective on the battlefield. And again, that's something you gotta give the Japanese credit for. The moment they realized, oh, we gotta adapt, they locked in and immediately adapted and proved themselves to be a dangerous force worthy of, kind of like, I remember reading about it and just kind of like proving themselves equal with the Western or dangerous, kind of equal in a sense that they can hold their own and, learn from these Western powers and modernize to be seen as no longer weak. And it did work for them, Again, they took it too far later on, but that's something that I was always impressed by with, like, Japan, for instance, that seeing that need to change and get with the times. I think China took a bit longer though, but again, unless they've adapted a lot of guns and whatnot, this is kind of a dangerous, beyond risky thing.
In response, a 20,000-strong Allied expeditionary force,
Holy
combining
crap.
troops from 8 different nations, descends on Peking. Amidst numerous atrocities, the Boxers are crushed, and the city is looted by the Allied armies. The Qing court is forced to sign the Boxer Protocol. Under its terms, China must pay crippling indemnities over 4 decades, almost twice the government's annual revenue.
Holy crap. Oh, that's brutal.
This is China's greatest humiliation yet. Under huge pressure to modernize the state, Cixi and the Qing court finally undertake sweeping reforms. The archaic civil service exam is abolished, to be replaced by modern schools with a Western curriculum. The first steps are taken to create a constitution, which will impose limits on the power of the emperor. The military is reorganized along Western lines, with improved officer training, equipment, and weaponry. Its most powerful contingent is the Beiyang Army, based in northern China, under General Yuan Shikai. But many believe the Qing reforms do not go far enough, and that only wholesale revolution can save China. One such would-be revolutionary, Sun Yat-sen. From a humble Cantonese family, Sun was educated outside China, in Hawaii. He is very different from China's old Confucian elite. A Christian convert, Sun speaks fluent English, but struggles with classical Chinese. Following his involvement in several failed uprisings.
I once had a friend who was really big into Chinese history and culture. Back when I was back in my teen years, during high school, my friend was really big on like Chinese history and whatnot, and I remember he said he was taking Chinese classes to try to learn how to speak, and he said, I think when I remember him saying something like tone was really important, and just the way something is said, like the tone is very, I guess, important, because a tone can take a word in a different meaning, which I think is interesting if I'm remembering correctly, that idea. Yeah, I think I'm saying Chinese, but I'm pretty sure the standard is Mandarin it's called, but yeah, I remember him talking about like how tone can have a big impact on the meaning of a word, which I always found interesting. Like here in America, well, English as a whole, America's not the only place that speaks English, but kind of like you can say a word and it is what it is, regardless of how you say it. Whether I say it in an angry way or a happy way, a word is kind of said. So I'm guessing it's a bit different. I never really looked too deep into the whole speaking of it. I just remember my friend mentioning about it being regarded as a tonal language, which is really interesting, and it does open up a lot of ideas, because I've never really ventured too far into the study of other languages. I know a lot about the English language, because, I took classes about the development of English and, how the words and everything kind of came about. But again, my knowledge is only limited to my own language. So, definitely, I've been thinking that if I ever get back into the studying of like linguistics and stuff, I think what I'd be most interested in is definitely Mandarin and, you know, Chinese, and just really see how a tonal language can really differ, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, I just remembered that, and I remember thinking of how interesting. I never looked into it, like I said, but I remember him telling me about that, and I remember being very fascinated by that concept of the tonal language.
Things against the Qing, he lives in exile in Europe. In 1905, Sun travels to Japan. In Tokyo, he founds the Tongmenghui, a revolutionary alliance whose goal is to overthrow Manchu rule and replace the Qing monarchy with a democratic republic. He advocates the three principles of nationalism, democracy, and the people's livelihood. To his supporters, Sun Yat-sen represents hope in a new future. And that future seems to be drawing closer.
The amount of times I've seen this plot beat repeated in history is insane. Like you know, there's always that point in an empire or great nation where things are kind of not moving forward, and then, you know, they kind of take sort of steps into modernizing, and then there's always that group just like, we're not going far enough, everything needs to be radically changed. Like, I'm just thinking about I was thinking about Russia at the moment, and, you know, the rebellions we learned about, that, like the Decemberist, for example, and it's just, like I said, I think history is a time loop. That's my theory, because so many events play out exactly the same way. The only difference is, you know, the people, the characters, or like the names, and maybe the geographical setting, but the plot beats are always the same. And ever since I got into history, I just noticed this endless trend of things always playing out the same way, regardless of whether we're in the Far East or the West or anywhere. It's always the same thing always happens. I just noticed these trends, and then I'm like, I think history is just one giant time loop. We're literally doing the same story all the time. It never, like, the core story never changes. It's kind of like the movie, when movies follow the 3-act structure. Like, technically, like, a lot of movies are exactly the same. Obviously, the characters and some of the stuff and the emphasis is a bit, you know, the outer exterior is different, but like the core beats are always there, and I feel like history is exactly the same way. That's why I come to this weird conclusion. I'm like, we're in a time loop. We're literally doing the same thing all the time. It happens all the time. Like, I don't know. To me, I feel like that's the part that's given me sort of an existential crisis. Well, it hasn't given me one. I'm kind of being dramatic there, but like, I think it would give anyone an existential crisis if they really thought about it like this. Like, ever since becoming a history reaction YouTuber, just I pick up on all these trends, and it's just, my goodness, it's just the same story over and over again. Like, holy crap. You know, it's like they say, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. I'm like, we have never learned then, because I feel like we've been repeating the same thing since the dawn of mankind. You know, nothing's new. I don't know, guys. For any of you fellow history buffs, do you kind of view the same thing as me? Do you notice all this, and have you had an existential crisis yet upon this mad realization or revelation?
In 1908, after a turbulent 47-year reign, Empress Dowager Cixi dies at the age of 72. The imperial throne of China falls to a 2-year-old infant, Pu Yi.
Yes, literally 2 years old and has to be pushed into all this. That's insane. Like, whenever we learn about child emperors or kings, I'm like, holy crap, those poor kids. They got thrust into something, and they'll just be taken advantage of, you know, by those around them. It's sad. But Puyi specifically has a really sad life. Like, I actually did look into him. There are even like there's movies about his life, and I was reading like excerpts from him. I remember many years ago, like even skimming his Wikipedia page. It's a really sad, tragic life he lived, you know. Between, not to say it absolves him from his own wrongdoings, like the dude definitely made mistakes for sure, but I don't know, something about like his story is just tragic to me, you know. And then, though at the end he seems sort of like alright after he kind of became a normal civilian. I remember reading excerpts like he couldn't do basic stuff, like tying shoes or stuff, because he had been kind of served upon a lot of his younger life, and then he was noted to be very clumsy later on. But he did get married and seemed to really love his wife of later years, so probably not the worst later on in life, but yeah, definitely early life kind of being thrust into situations, kind of used as a puppet by the Japanese, I think, when he was the emperor of Manchuria. You know, like, I don't know, just something about his story to me is just tragic and sort of sad, you know what I mean? I don't know. Yeah. But not to excuse all the bad things he did too. Kinda had a sadistic streak, but especially when he was younger. You know, by the way, like I said, I don't want to ignore that, yeah, he was not a perfect, some would even say not a good person, but I don't know. I still can't help but kind of feel bad. It's kind of like the Tsar Nicholas situation with me. Like, Tsar Nicholas did bad things when he was the last Tsar of Russia. He made mistakes, and people did suffer under him, and I never want to ignore that. But I still can't help but kind of feel bad for Tsar Nicholas, someone put in a position of power who just really wasn't capable or ready for it. Especially this guy who he never had a chance, especially in his young ascension and kind of being, in some ways at times in his life, a prisoner or just a puppet. Not to say that he didn't make bad decisions and, you know, do bad things, as he did. I don't want to ignore that, or, you know, say he was perfect or some sweet, innocent angel all the time, but I guess it's just a Tsar Nicholas situation. I kind of still kind of feel like, in some ways his life is tragic, you know? But again, at the end of his days, he seemed to find some type of contentment, you know? Gardening and whatnot. So it was a real riches to rags story. But, yeah, overall, I don't know. What do you guys think about the last emperor of China? What are your thoughts about him?
At a time of crisis and mounting opposition, the Qing dynasty has never been weaker.
Do not miss.
Gosh
Carlos
darn it.
versus Garcia.
It will be my object to help 400 million countrymen, and to endeavor to make the blessings of the Republic a reality.
The 9th of October, 1911, Hankou, Hubei Province. Members of a secret revolutionary society with links to the Tongmanhui are making bombs when there's an explosion. Their cover blown. The authorities arrest and later execute several of the group's leaders, but it only pours fuel on the fire. An uprising breaks out in the neighboring city of Wuchang. Crucially, soldiers of Hubei province's new army are persuaded to mutiny and join the revolt. After 24 hours of fierce fighting, claiming hundreds of lives, Wuchang falls to the revolutionaries. On the 12th of October, a new military government claims authority in the province. It publicly denounces the crimes of the Qing dynasty and calls on other provinces to join it in overthrowing the monarchy. The revolution spreads like wildfire, mostly in cities and towns where there is deep-seated resentment against Qing rule. Within 6 weeks, 16 of China's 26 provinces have seceded.
My goodness.
In many areas, such as Shanxi, the ruling Manchu are targeted and massacred. Panic grips the Qing court in Peking. General Yuan Shikai of the Beiyang army is summoned to crush the revolutionaries. China is soon in a state of open civil war between Yuan's forces in the north and the rebels in the south. In the chaos of war and revolution, both Tibet and Outer Mongolia declare their independence from China. On the 1st of January 1912,
Holy crap, just seeing everything fall apart is insane. You know, I've been playing Total War Rome 2, and like I was playing like as Macedon, and like my goal was to like recreate Alexander's empire, so I like conquered basically Greece and whatnot and went eastward. There comes a point in the game where you just constantly have like successions and like revolts and then civil wars, and it's insane to me. And like I'm trying so hard with the bribery and trying to manage the politics, and it just, I can't help it. Like I kept having a succession every few turns, like I think like 10 or less turns, and after a while I was like, holy crap, like I don't know, just like it is just something that just kept happening to the point I even got like a mod in the next one where I'm like, okay, can I stop with the succession civil wars after a bit? But a mod to get rid of that, but because the politics in that game are insane. But yeah, just that kind of reminded me of that. But just like, yeah, you see that kind of extent where just discontentment keeps showing up, and then just the constant revolts, except just something about like the revolt of China, just insane with how many like millions joining in. I don't know, it's just crazy, dude.
Nanking, the rebels proclaim the establishment of the Republic of China. Sun Yat-sen, who has just returned to China from the USA, is sworn in as its provisional president. After years of exile, fundraising and plotting, Sun has finally secured political power.
Wow.
His government immediately begins work on a new democratic constitution and passes far-reaching reforms. Archaic practices are abolished, such as growing queues, the long hair that symbolizes submission to the Manchu, as well as foot binding and kowtowing.
Yeah, the foot binding's the one that bugs me. Like, oh. Especially like in like women had to get that a lot. It's like, oh my gosh. Sorry, I just had like a flashback to the whole thing. Remember learning about it for the first time. It's like, oh my gosh.
In the new multi-ethnic Chinese Republic, all will be equal. Its flag will have 5 colors for 5 races under one union: Han, Manchu, Mongol, Muslim and Tibetan. But for now, the Republic only occupies the southern half of China, and the success of the revolution remains far from certain. So, to unite China and secure the future of the Republic, Sun Yat-sen makes a shock offer to General Yuan Shikai. If he can persuade the Qing Imperial family to abdicate, he can be president.
Oh, wow.
Yuan accepts and informs the imperial family that only by giving up the throne can their lives and comfort be guaranteed. On the 12th of February 1912, 6-year-old Emperor Puyi abdicates. Though for now, he and his court continue to live in Peking's palace complex, the Forbidden City.
An IQ of 8.
More than 2,000 years of imperial rule in China are at an end.
Just like that, huh? It's so crazy. Just like, you know, for so long, how, like, you know, the dynasty empire system was around and then just gone, you know? I don't know, what is it about that always, like, that's the thing I've always found interesting with so many regime changes in certain places of the world, where at one point one empire ruled and then just to go away, like the aftermath, it's like what I'm so fascinated with, like the average Joe thought, you know, like so many parts of the world for thousands of years were ruled by the Romans, and then, well, Romans are gone now, it's like, I don't know, it's like, there's just something really interesting about just that. It's just how it happens, and then I don't know if I'm getting my point across, but I always kind of found some stuff like that interesting, you know?
In its place, the only major republic in Asia. 3 days later, General Yuan Shikai becomes provisional president of the Republic of China. But almost immediately, the revolutionaries fall out with the new president, whose personal ambition is all too clear. Now in opposition, Sun Yat-sen and his allies established the Kuomintang, or KMT, an evolution of the Tongmanhui. Elections are held at the end of the year, the first nationwide democratic elections ever held in China, though only around 5% of the population are allowed to vote. The Kuomintang win convincingly, taking nearly half the seats in the new National Assembly. Kuomintang leader Song Jiaorun, a close ally of Sun Yat-sen, is all but guaranteed to become the next Prime Minister. On the 20th of March 1913, as he is boarding a train in Shanghai, he is shot twice at close range.
Holy crap.
No conclusive evidence is ever found, but it's widely believed the assassination was carried out on President Yuan's orders. China's first democratic elections will prove to be its last.
Yeah, literally the first, and it literally fell apart right then and there. My goodness.
The next year, rivalry between the Kuomintang and President Yuan's government explodes once more into armed conflict. But Yuan's Beiyang army is too strong. The Kuomintang and its supporters are defeated. The party is outlawed, and Sun Yat-sen returns to exile in Japan. Yuan Shikai has successfully grabbed power for
All that, all the exile, finally things look like they turn around, and then he gets immediately exiled again. Oh, that sucks. Wow, that's awful.
himself. China is now, in effect, a military dictatorship. But the president is unable to solve any of the problems he's inherited from the Qing Empire. He dies of natural causes just 3 years later. And China slides back into chaos.
Oh no. Okay. Zedong. Yeah, the future leader of China right there. I very much look forward to the destruction of the old universe, because from its demise will come a new one, and will it not be better than the old? Depends. Yeah, alright, let's get to it.
The 1911 revolution failed to establish a stable republic in China, but it does open the way for an avalanche of radical new ideas. Across China, young intellectuals are increasingly convinced that only a total break with China's past can secure its future. Their ideas crystallize in the new.
Yep, out with the old, in with the new. Like I said, we've seen this so many times play out in history where it's usually always the youth who want the most change. The most radical people are the young ones. Because it's like, alright, time to, let's just, basically, they just want to do, they want everything to be different. We need to go all in with the change. If we're going to change, we need to go all in. And that's usually how it goes with these things.
Culture movement. Chun Du-shio is one of its most prominent leaders. From a wealthy family, Chun had been immersed in classical Chinese teaching from a young age, but later turned his back on Confucian thought. In 1915, he founded the magazine New Youth, which became home to the most important radical writers in China. As a young professor at Peking University, Chun gathered like-minded intellectuals around him, such as Hu Shi, who calls for traditional Chinese characters to be replaced by Baihua, which better represents spoken Chinese. Among their students, a young man from rural Hunan province named Mao Zedong. Chun Du-shio and the New Culture movement argue for a complete rejection of Confucianism. In its place, they want democracy, science, Chinese nationalism, and radical social change, including female emancipation and greater gender equality. They will soon have their chance to take these ideas to the nation. In 1919, World War I's victorious powers are meeting in Paris to agree the post-war settlement. During the war, China had sided with the Allies and sent 140,000 men to serve as laborers on the Western Front. In recognition of this contribution, the Chinese expected to regain control of Germany's territory in Shandong. But now, news arrives that this colony has instead been awarded to Japan. The response in China is outrage.
Picked a great man.
On the 4th of
Yeah, it's cool to see, like, you know, China's involvement, because obviously with World War I have heard of it, but I never, like, no one ever went into full depth, so cool to see that they contributed, you know, 100,000 men, you know, to that, and then they didn't really get what they wanted out of that, which sucks. Like, again, the Western powers definitely, you get the vibe in this video, you know, weren't the kindest to China in a lot of times, you know.
May, 3,000 angry students take to the streets of Peking. They gather at Tiananmen, the entrance gate to the Forbidden City. Inspired by the New Culture movement, their placards in Chinese, English, and French call for Mr. Democracy and Mr. Science. Protests spread across the country, uniting students and workers against the government and the Western powers, who are seen to have betrayed China yet again. The protests achieve little in the short term, but will come to be seen as a watershed in China's march towards a modern, nationalist future. Many protesters are now disillusioned with Western liberal democracies. Some turn to Marxism, inspired by the success of the 1917 revolution in Russia, which seems to offer a model for total national transformation. Among these converts, the 25-year-old Mao Zedong. He writes, "I venture to make a singular assertion. One day, the reform of the Chinese people will be more profound than that of any other people. And the society of the Chinese people will be more radiant than any other people. Our golden age, our age of glory and splendor, lies before us." In July 1921, the founding Congress of the Chinese Communist Party takes place in the French concession in Shanghai. There are just 13 members present, who meet in secret. Disrupted by French police, the group moves to a pleasure boat on South Lake. Mao Zedong is a founding member. The first General Secretary is Chun Duxiu. Despite their tiny numbers, they are determined to seize control of China's revolution.
Yeah, very foreboding, great foreshadowing. You know, I am interested in seeing how epic history will portray Mao Zedong. It's actually because there is a lot of talk regarding him. You know, I've heard in China that he's still a very revered man, and you know, and then there are some discourse here in the West that kind of just put him in the exact same league as Stalin and Hitler, at least in terms of just, you know, the death toll, and you get me, not in the most positive of lights, and so I'm really interested in seeing what approach epic history is gonna take with this, because I feel like it could be controversial depending on if they, you know, how they portray it. A very even right now, I'm like kind of stepping on my words a bit carefully. I don't know. What do you guys think about Mao Zedong? I actually want to hear what you guys think regarding him, and see if your ideas might like match mine. But we'll see. The progress of our revolution should be divided into stages. The first stage is a period of destruction, during which in which military rule is installed. Oh boy. That's a very foreboding sentence there. The Warlord era. You know, I when I was in high school, we did read novels, especially around my junior year to senior year. Like 1984, for example. But yeah, I remember the one novel that I still really remember well from high school was in my junior year. We read this novel called The Good Earth, which is set in China, and I believe while the novel doesn't give a definitive time in terms of China, like the year example, it does kind of like heavily, I guess, match around this time, you know, like especially the Warlord era, and it's a really interesting novel. I think that was like the first major, I guess, kind of exploration of some Chinese history, at least getting the door open for me to kind of start learning a bit more throughout the years. So it's actually a really good novel on its own too. So yeah, I like kind of being reminded of that.
Following the death of the dictator Yuan Shikai, China had slid back into civil war. Generals compete to control the government in Peking, while the country is torn apart by rival warlords with their own private armies. Some are little more than organized criminals in uniform. The most prominent groups are the Zhili clique, the Anhui clique, and the Fengtian clique, each named after their provincial power base. By 1921, Sun Yat-sen's Kuomintang has established a military government of its own in Canton. Both the Kuomintang and communists realize they can only obtain power if they first defeat the warlords. Both believe they can use the other to reach their goal. In 1923, with the Soviet Union's backing, the Chinese Communist Party allies itself with the Kuomintang in a pact known as the First United Front. Chinese communists are urged to join the Kuomintang, which is itself transformed with the help of Soviet advisors, funds, and arms. Soviet advisors also helped to set up a military academy on Huangpu Island. It will be run by Sun's chief military advisor, a rising star named Chiang Kai-shek. His aim is to mold the Kuomintang army into a disciplined and effective fighting force. But just months later, while visiting the north to negotiate with the warlords, Sun Yat-sen falls ill. On the 12th of March 1925, he dies from cancer in Peking, aged 58. His last words: peace, struggle, save China. Sun's death leaves the Kuomintang in disarray, and China at a crossroads. The only certainty seems to be further civil war. For Sun's loyal lieutenant, however, the road ahead is clear. On hearing news of Sun Yat-sen's death, Chiang Kai-shek tells his wife, "If I control the army, I will have the power to control the country. It is my road to leadership." In Peking, the Forbidden City lies empty. The last emperor, Pu Yi, had been evicted by a local warlord and left to seek Japanese protection. Whoever is to lead China now will face enormous challenges. Fragile alliances, a fragmented country, and powerful neighbors that seek to plunge China back into an age of humiliation. Can't wait for the next episode. Great news!
Okay, so the rest seems to be advertisement and no doubt ads. So this, I feel like this video is already, I'm going too long already, but and I do kind of want to share my thoughts. Overall, I'm really happy that, you know, this series, he didn't try to do all of Chinese history from beginning to end. I feel like he did try that a lot with Russia, which I guess the biggest critique is that, you know, some events can't really get too much shine because you gotta do a lot, and like there's only so much you can do in 30 minutes, right? But I'm kind of glad that he kind of narrowed the scope to this, to just, you know, the rise of modern China, and whatnot. I'm really happy about that. I feel like definitely gives a lot more razor sharp focus into this period. And again, I'm really happy because I was actually interested in the Warlord era. I remember like around the time I was reading of the Good Earth, and kind of like, wow, you know, there's so much points in Chinese history between like this, the Three Kingdoms, and many others where it's just like, dang, you could do like so much with that. Like I wouldn't mind like an in-depth thorough look of periods like this from like these YouTubers, because there's just so much to talk about. And overall, yeah, very informative. I am really interested in just seeing how epic history, because I think he does try to be as objective as possible, as neutral. But again, we're definitely in a topic that's still very, you know, on kind of shaky ground. Like I said, I'm interested in hearing how he talks about, you know, Mao Zedong and whatnot, and you know, obviously China, and its politics here in the modern day, and then its relationship with the USA, and then there's Taiwan. So I do admire him for kind of getting into it, though I'm a bit like wondering how he's gonna approach this, because I do feel like these discussions can possibly be a powder keg in some sense, as to the discourse. That's why I usually try to avoid modern history on this channel, because like I feel like it's just too the idea of controversy and stuff. It's really easy, like, yeah, guys, let me give you my thoughts on the Ukraine war, and then just, you know, but again, it seems like this series is inevitable. We're going to be talking about the modern day, so I'm a bit scared, but also excited to see where this all goes. So, either way, it'll be informative, so I guess that's the whole point. I'm gonna end the video right here, and I'll see you guys tomorrow when we do the next part. Bye, everyone.